Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third and last panel discussion in the Black Reflection series. My name is Christian McBride, and I will be the moderator for tonight's conversation. Before I introduce myself and my fellow panelists, I want to share a little bit about this discussion series. Black Reflections was created directly in response to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis this summer. The protest movement that followed has pushed us all to consider the role of race in every part of our society, including music. Each discussion in the Black Reflection series focuses on a different aspect of Black artistry and music, the contributions of Black artists, the experiences of Black artists, and what a just future for Black artists looks like in classical music. Tonight's discussion will focus on creating a just future for Black artists. This panel is a mix of Black artists, scholars, professors, and executives, all with their own perspectives on how to pursue racial justice in classical music. We will talk about what obstacles Black musicians face today, what needs to change within our institutions, and our hopes for a better future for Black artists. On that note, I'd like to introduce myself and open the floor to my fellow panelists. My name is Christian McBride. I am a bassist. I do a few things. I host an NPR radio show called Jazz Night in America. I'm artistic director of Jazz House Kids, a wonderful organization that my wife, Melissa Walker, started many, many years ago. And I'm all things music. And I think all of our panelists tonight are all things music. We have a primary thing that we do, but we're all about the music. Without further ado, I'd like to bring on our guest this evening. Our first guest is the General Director of the Fort Worth Opera. Please welcome Ms. Afton Battle. Ms. Battle, how are you?
I'm doing well, Christian. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend.
Good.
Now, I know a little bit about your history, but if you could share a little more about yourself with all of us, tell us the Afton Battle story.
Absolutely. I am a classically trained musician, opera singer. I studied at the University of Houston and Westminster Choir College. I had a career for a short period of time until I entered into arts administration, and currently was just named the General Director of Fort Worth Opera, the first female director, general director of this company, and the first Black female general director of this company.
Right on, right on. And all of you out there who are watching, I urge you to look at a fantastic discussion Miss Battle and my homegirl, the great Karen Slack, had.
Yes.
That was fantastic. I really enjoyed every minute of that.
It was a great conversation. She is a dear, dear friend, a stellar, dynamite musician, and an all-around sister.
Yeah, as are you, my friend. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to speak with you. Our next guest is the Dean of the Beaman School of Music. Please welcome Miss Toni Marie Montgomery. How are you, Toni Marie?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. So I'm in my office, although I'm actually, I'm sitting inside my office, but the photo behind is of our building of the Beaman School of Music in Evanston, Illinois. I'm trained as a pianist. I have my master's and doctoral degree from University of Michigan in accompanying and chamber music. And this is, believe it or not, my 18th year here as Dean of the Music School. So I'm pleased to be here.
I very much look forward to having this discussion with you, and I look forward to when this pandemic is over and we can actually all be together in person. And I'd love to meet you and just pick your brain about a whole bunch of stuff.
Likewise, thank you.
My pleasure. Our next guest is a world-class cellist. She plays in the Seattle Symphony. Please welcome Miss Joy Payton Stevens.
Hey, good evening,
Joy.
Christian. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you
Awesome.
for joining us this evening. It's wonderful to see you.
Absolutely.
And give us some Joy Payton Stevens facts.
All right. So I've been a cellist since the age of 4. I've been raised in the industry all my life, been through all the music festivals, conservatory auditions, professional auditions. And along the way, I've had the opportunity to travel to and live in some of the most beautiful parts of this country. Currently, I'm a section cellist with the Seattle Symphony, but I'm actually months away from earning my MBA from Columbia University as well. So it's been a wild, wild journey so far.
Fantastic. Now, if I'm not, did you grow up in Cleveland?
Cleveland, born and raised.
Yes.
Yes.
And I've actually heard about you a long time ago.
My reputation precedes me.
Yeah, but it's a great reputation, and you are loved. Know that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of yours as well.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm so glad to finally get to meet you and speak with you in this panel this evening.
Definitely.
Our final guest for the evening is another world-class musician. He is an oboist with the Nashville Symphony, Brother Titus Underwood.
How you doing?
How are you, my man?
I'm doing all right. I am in the +44. I'm in London right now, playing with Chineke.
Yes.
Out here, so we're doing some music, some taping, some chamber music. So I'm out here across the pond at the moment. I'm originally from Pensacola, Florida, born and raised. Went to Cleveland Institute of Music for my undergrad, Juilliard for my master's, then Coburn for a post-grad program. And I'm principal oboe of the Nashville Symphony. And like Joy said, I've been to the most beautiful parts of this country, traveled all over the world with this instrument. So I'm just glad to be here today.
Yes. Well, it's wonderful to see you. I'm a big fan of all of you, but I've enjoyed many of you on YouTube. Titus, you have some fantastic clips on YouTube I've enjoyed, and you are a marvelous musician. It's a thrill to speak with you, my man.
Likewise.
I hope all of you are staying safe in this pandemic. Before we even get to any of the questions on this talk this evening, I feel like the tone and things, this conversation would have been a lot different before COVID-19. So COVID-19 has just put another layer on top of all of the strife that's been going on in our world these days. But I do want to start with sort of a broad stroke question. What do you think are the largest obstacles for racial diversity in classical music? I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and I'm always grateful that I grew up in such a diverse city. A lot of people from a lot of different walks of life doing a lot of different things, but classical music is not something a lot of my peers wanted to get involved in. So I'd like to start with you, Titus. What do you think are some of the largest obstacles for racial diversity in classical music?
That's a great question. I mean, the one thing I always like to say is, I love the title of it, Black Reflections. So I like to stay in that specificity of Black people when we're talking about it. It's not that I'm not in solidarity with other groups and people of color and marginalized people. I like to be very specific about that. So I've always say, right now I'm advocating for Black artists within this music sphere, because a lot of times one of the hard things is when we're approaching diversity, sometimes we're not necessarily recognized, but a lot of times that we're the people who spur these movements and the momentum goes, but we don't necessarily get a lot of times the tangible benefits within this business as it pertains to Black people specifically. But one of the main challenges is that we don't address it specifically. And we kind of get crowbarred within this flatness of things, of myriad of things, instead of dealing with an issue that's very, that's focused on Black artists. So one of the things I would like to see is that, that conversation of speaking about Black artists and Black composers and Black performers, that we can stay specifically on that and then go forward with that and feel comfortable in that space without having to introduce other things. So I know that there are a lot of issues, like I saw the solidarity things from different organizations and Black Lives Matter. So I said, okay, I'm gonna hold you accountable to that statement and let's see what tangible results we can get from there.
Right. Joy?
Yeah, I love a lot of what Titus was saying, but just for a second, and it's a great question, but just for a second, I just wanted to address that word diversity, especially in this context. It always kind of gets me a little bit because it sort of connotates that, it's a plugin or something that we're going to overlay across like what naturally happens. And I just want to reframe that a little bit. And I want to think about how strange it is actually the homogeneity of the classical music industry. So why is classical music and the classical arts more generally, and many other institutions of power, so homogenous? This is by design. And if you look at pretty much any institution of power, you'll see that it's a pretty homogenous group who are the decision makers and who are in charge of that. And it's kind of funny. I was in an argument with somebody who literally the following day became an ex over this. We were talking about, decision makers and that sort of thing. I said, okay, but like the people who are on that board, like I've never looked up this board before in my life. I don't know much about them, but I guarantee that at least 75% of them are homogenous. And we pulled out the Google, looked it up, and surprise, surprise, it was a very homogenous group of people. So the reason why we are here, the reason why things look the way that they do is because there's a series of decisions that are being made on a regular basis. So every time there's a staff meeting, every time there's a board meeting, every time a soloist or a conductor is selected, every time a contract is being negotiated, those are decisions that are being made about what the organization and what the industry, by extension, is going to look and feel like. And ultimately, if the art form will remain relevant or will become obsolete. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about these decisions that are being made and how if you want something to look different, you're going to have to start making different decisions.
Yes, absolutely. Afton, you jump on that?
1,000%. One of the largest obstacles in that prohibit this type of diversity, but what I like to say as equity in classical music for Black artists is the fact that for a lot of us, we have not been introduced to this art form. And I will speak for myself personally. I did not know what opera was. I did not know what classical music was. I knew what I saw on TV back in the day when you used to catch PBS, that a glimpse of like Leontine Price singing into the camera, or, you know, Jesse Norman singing into the camera, one of those Met videos that they used to produce. But I didn't know what it was. And I did not know what it was because it was never presented to me as a young Black girl as an option to even know what it was. So there was no representation of any way, in any way. And I didn't know what classical music was until I was a teenager and in high school, because someone introduced me to it who happened to be a white woman. And I think that that obstacle and that barrier exists because we don't oftentimes have accessibility to the thing. And exactly what Joy was saying, sitting in the position I currently sit in as general director, I knew this coming in to this, that the people who make the decisions as to whether or not Black folks are on stage, behind the stage, in the office, are being represented are white people, almost exclusively. And that is, you know, that is fine to say because it is the truth. It's not a misrepresentation of the truth. And so the obstacles exist because we don't have Black folk in the position to make the decision to cast Black folk on stage, to cast Black directors, to cast Black lighting designers, and the list just goes on and on and on. So then it's just a perpetuation of the, you know, the ivory tower, as I refer to it a lot of times, especially in the opera industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it almost sounds like you're saying like there actually needs to be a lot of work that needs to be done, not just inside the institution, but there also needs to be some work that's done before you even get to that point when it comes to just exposing young Black children to what this music is, you know?
1000%, because that's the only way, in my opinion, that you can be, as an institution, truly representative of the community that you serve.
Yeah.
It is the only way. You have to get into every nook and cranny of your community that you serve and truly go into those communities to understand where they're coming from, to meet them where they are, before you even think about inviting them to come to where you are, which
Right.
9 times out of 10 is some big shiny theater downtown or in some part of town that they don't oftentimes go to.
Right.
They don't feel welcomed, invited, seen, safe. It's all of those things. So it starts, if you take it all the way back, for me, it starts with that true authentic community engagement and development and audience development. So then when you get to the point of having a show, a concert, you're producing something, you've already engaged this community that you serve, that you should be representing on your stage and off stage and behind the stage and in your office. You've already established this connection with them, this relationship with them, that they know who you are and you know who they are. So that then when you invite them to come and meet you in your house, you know, wherever that is, they feel welcomed because they feel that they are a part of something that recognizes who they are.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that amazing answer. Tony Marie, would you please jump in there?
Sure. I think one of the benefits of going last is that I can say yes, ditto. But specifically, I definitely agree with Afton, the fact that students, children need to have that exposure to this music, but they also need to know the history. the contributions of so many African-American musicians and composers from 1700s, 1800s, not just the present time. And then I'll echo Joy and also Afton, addressing the issue of representation. The absence of people in leadership positions, if they're in orchestras, in opera companies, in music schools like mine, not having role models who are those administrators or who are those faculty whom other students can say, wow, I aspire to these positions. I never knew that that was possible. So representation is really an important aspect of this.
Well, I was thinking of the story that I couldn't wait to share with all of you, is that how I kind of backed into learning about classical music even before I got into middle school and started playing the double bass in middle school. My grandfather had there used to be a company called Funk and Wagnalls. They made like encyclopedias and things like that. So my grandfather had this box set of Funk and Wagnall classical albums. I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old, and they had Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and then I saw funk on the top of the album, Funk and Wagnalls. So I thought, oh, this must be a funk album, right? Because it says it on the record. And so I put this. I was like, Beethoven. This he doesn't look funky, but I'm going to try it anyway because the album, the record said Funk and Wagnalls. And so I put it on. I was pleasantly surprised. It was not funk, but it was music that really, really captured my imagination. And once I got to middle school, I started playing in an orchestra. After it was almost the same story. My very first teacher, Margie Keefe, she took us all to see the Philadelphia Orchestra one night, and Yo-Yo Ma was the guest soloist with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and he played the Haydn Cello Concerto in D, and that blew my mind. I mean, he looked just so happy playing. It's just like he was looking around, and I was like, wow, this cat really enjoys himself, and I really connected with his joy, and but it was exposure. I saw the orchestra when I was 11 years old, and that did me in. My next question I'd like to ask all of you is, what would make our orchestras and institutions more representative of the communities they serve? Tony Marie, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I'm thinking more so the second part of that question, which is about concert halls. Can I respond to that aspect, Christian?
Please.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I think of how many concerts that I've given, recitals, and friends who have no interest in music. It's not that they don't have an interest in music, but they've never gone to a classical concert. And the first question that they ask me is, what do I wear? And so the issue is of going into this hallowed space, this gilded hall, which doesn't seem welcoming to individuals. And so it reminds me of a time several years ago, I hosted an event with alumni from San Francisco Symphony, because we have alums from our school who were playing in the symphony. And we had the concert, we had a reception, it was in Davies Hall. I walked through the backspace to then symphony space, which was just simply amazing. There were hundreds of people, and they looked so much different than those who were in Davies Hall because they were young. It was a very diverse audience, but there were like 200, 300 people who were there to hear new music of the 20th, 21st century. And there was the composer, John Adams, whom I know, who then was about to go on to speak, to talk about a quartet that he had written. But for me, I'll never forget that, because I'm told that people stand in line for hours before the concert at Symphony Space so that they can go in. Yes, there were alcoholic drinks, but that wasn't the reason they were there. It was because there was the use of technology. There were screens there on the walls, and people then were hearing something that was really exciting. Not that the concert that we heard by San Francisco Symphony was not exciting, but it was just an entirely different audience from the same city. And so I think that if we can think of different spaces for our performances, like the Poisson Rouge in New York City, not thinking of just these halls that seem, you're so tight and you have to sit there, and God forbid if you would clap, between movements, but that are more welcoming and that people feel like they're a part of what's happening, and it's happening now.
Yeah, yeah. Afton, would you care to follow up on that?
Yeah, for the theater space, we can't be represented, and I said this, previously, is we can't be representative of the community if we don't know who the community is, right? So growing up, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. Well, I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and I knew who my community was. And then I went to high school in Amarillo, Texas, and that's when I learned what opera was. And my first voice teacher and the woman who introduced me to opera knew who the community was. She knew who her community was. It was a mixed, diverse, ethnically diverse community that was segregated because Amarillo is just, in the Panhandle. But she knew who her community was, and she knew who those key community leaders were, who could get her what she needed and what she wanted, if that makes any sense, right? Because I can, as a leader of an opera company, say, yes, I'm going to go into X, Y, and Z community and, put something on. But if I don't have the buy-in of the community with the buy-in of the civic leaders of that community, of community organizers, of faith leaders, then I have nothing. And if I don't show a genuine interest, meet them where they are, if I don't continue to follow up on that. You know how when you really want a job, you follow up with those emails?
Yes.
Just wanted to follow up, see where things were. If you don't follow up with those nuggets that you put out there, then it will fall flat. And she knew who her community was. She was, true friends with preachers in the Black community, community service organization leaders, community center, organizers. And she every year put on a Lift Every Voice concert. And she featured Black talent in that community. So she knew who she was talking to. And that is why, in my opinion, her company, Amarillo Opera, when she was running it, was truly representative of the community, because she took the time to learn who her community was. And oftentimes, and I can only speak from my experience as a singer and my experience running a company, oftentimes opera companies don't take the time to get to know who their community is, and they don't take the time to follow up and follow through, which shows a lack of interest, in my opinion. And so it is that thing of investing in your community so that your community invests in you, so that then you can be representative of that community by saying, oh, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z show. We need X number of supers, X number of volunteer chorus to help fill out the chorus, whatever it is. And people are hyping, they're like, oh yeah, we want to come and do that. Yes, we want to be a part of that because you are a part of us. Otherwise, that just completely falls flat. So if you don't take the time to get to know who your community is, why they matter, and how to meet them exactly where they are, bringing what you have to them in a way that is digestible, in a way that is entertaining, in a way that makes sense, in a way that is engaging, then you might as well, literally be the blonde hair, blue-eyed woman with the horns, because it is just like going like this, just missing one another.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Such nuggets of wisdom there. Joy, making these orchestras more representative and making the experience more welcoming to non-white audiences. I'd love to hear your reactions to the two things you've heard so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going off of what Afton was just talking about, I mean, what she's talking about is relationship building. And it's not easy to do, but it's not impossible to do either. And it is fundamental to connecting with a community that perhaps is not traditionally found in your audience or on your staff or on your board or even in your orchestra. So going to the audience, I do want to talk about what it feels like for me when I have the opportunity to watch a concert, even in my own concert hall at Benaria Concert Hall. As I mentioned, I've been playing cello since I was 4. I've been in this game for a long time. If anybody should feel comfortable in a concert hall, it's me. And I do not. When I sit in an audience, I oftentimes feel very self-conscious. I feel as though I'm being looked at and perhaps, being thought about like, oh, does she know where she is? What is she doing here? Because I am literally one of maybe a handful of people of color in that audience. When I stand on stage at the end of a piece and we stand to receive the audience's applause, I oftentimes will play my own personal game, find the Black person in the audience, and I oftentimes lose that game. So it's
yeah, I think we all do that.
Okay, cool. I was like, surely I'm not the only one.
That's right.
And so it's strange to have come up in this industry for so long and to love this art form so much and to have it be completely 110% a part of who you are and what you identify as, but to really not have it reflected at all. So if I'm feeling this way, it's got to be kind of crazy for somebody who's not initiated and is not, a part of this world traditionally, to walk into a concert hall and there's just no way that they're going to feel welcomed or invited. And so, we've said this a couple of times already on this video call, representation matters. And I always go back to this one story that I heard a little bit ago about Marin Alsop, the famous female conductor. And as we all know on this call, female conductors are very rare in the industry, especially at the level at which she's been able to rise. And Marin Alsop went and visited a class of young kids, and she was talking about being a conductor and what a conductor is. And a young boy leaned over to his fellow classmate, who was a girl, and he said, "I think maybe one day I'll be a conductor." And she looked at him and she said, "Boys can't be conductors. Look, it's a woman up there." And since we know that being a female conductor is so rare, it's just a really hilarious, but also a little sad anecdote about how much representation matters, how important it is to see people in positions. And this was not a conscious decision that little girl was making. It was just what she saw before her. And it's a very literal translation of the way we all see the world.
Wow. Yeah, that's something else. Brother Titus.
Yes, absolutely. I want to. I love what everyone's saying. I love what Tony Reed said. You can hear everyone in like, yep. I want to go with a different spin on it. When we talk about, I hear to think about community, and usually when arts institutions, especially classical institutions, speak about community, it's always something that's not already there. And the thing is that the machine is working the way it's supposed to work. So the community that they want to be there is there. They are reaching a community that they want to reach. The thing is that happens is that a lot of times they don't know the Black community. And the other thing is, if you have Black people within the organization, you have more natural bridges to that community. You will have to figure out how to talk to these people. Like when I play Look for the Black Person, me sitting from the stage into the audience, I give them the nod. I give them the what's up. I give them the peace. I give them, I see you. There's already a cultural affirmation that's happening there. Because when people come to a concert hall, there's two things that's happening. They're enjoying the music and they're being culturally affirmed. Who's being culturally affirmed there? Are also Black people being culturally affirmed in American orchestras? I mean, and for me, I mean, I'm a person who comes from descendants of slaves in this country. I'm at least 10 generations deep in this country. So I'm just as American as anyone else is American. So if we're in the American Orchestra, why aren't the composers who've been writing music from my background are not being culturally exalted like they're supposed to be? If we're an American Orchestra, or are we a European approximate? Like, which one are we? Like, what are we figuring out? Like, and are the people who are, a lot of people who are white Americans in orchestras, are they connected to Brahms? Are they connected to Puccini? Is that like their ancestor? So like, it's all about this thinking of like, there's white and there's a disconnect between the two. So my thing is that you need to have the personnel that's there. You know, do you find that valuable for us to be there? Or does it devalue it? Because every time I hear about Black people being in the organization, people start talking about quality. So is that a subconscious thing that people say, if there are too many Black people here, does the quality go down? Because we live in a very segregated America, if we're being real. So if I'm at the pinnacle of where I can go enjoy the best art ever, in most of these halls in the best part of town, you know, with millions of dollars in endowments and things, if I come here and there are like 15 Black people on stage, am I in the best part of town? You know, so, and I always say that when it comes down to Black people in the organization, you need to have enough people from that people group to have diversity of thought amongst that people group. Representation needs to have cultural representation there as well, not just melanin, someone just seeing me there, but actual, am I being reflected culturally there? And are you coming up with the best solutions to connect to the Black community? Because if you have, you know, 20 Black people there, then they bring their culture there, and then they have diversity of thought amongst that people group to crystallize the best idea to actually connect with the people. So, and what I see is in this industry a lot of times is that there are a lot of Black artists who are already ready to play in these organizations. It's just that the system hasn't necessarily been fair for us to be there. And then we have a choice to make with that, right? Because I do agree that we should be reaching the children. Like, my parents showed me classical music. I was exposed to that from my two Black parents growing up in the church, Pentecostal church. Like, they took me also to the symphony. So, you know, my sister played violin, you know, she also went to school in New York. So I was exposed to it as a child. So it wasn't a foreign thing to me. But what I have to say is we have a decision to make. If the institutions aren't exactly welcoming it, then what's the plan B? Is the plan B to keep pushing, or is it to create new platforms in which we can prove that cultural ground towards ourselves? Because we know how to talk to our own people. We don't have to teach. I don't have to teach a Black person how to talk to another Black person. You know, so like, you know what culturally resonates with those children. You know what culturally resonates with. So you have the advantage within that to bring people to audience, to the stage that you bring. So like, and also institutions, a lot of them are suffering right now. We're in the age of the internet. The internet is the new stage. So you can put out whatever you want and reach as many people as you want. You know, find some Black composers and record it, play it, sync it up, put it online. Yep. Like, if you want to reach Black children, create something that will reach Black children. Put it online. They're looking at their phones anyways on TikTok. Like, do something that will reach them. So I think that we can be more innovative by creating new things and new platforms and all this stuff. If we can't turn that Titanic in the swimming pool to say, hey, we're valuable, they have to find out why we need to be there first. So if they don't know why we need to be there, there are many allies who want to know, then you need to come along and really listen and educate yourself on this, on the history of how we're here, so that you have more conviction than just an emotional response to, what do I need to do now? You know, you need to be anchored in this history, read some books and get to know what's going on. And then we can make some progress. But in the meantime, also building our own platforms and representing our own the best that we can, and reaching our community one-on-one with ourselves.
It's very, no, please go right ahead.
Sorry, something that Titus said that really resonated with me was affirmation. And I think Joy also said this, was the feeling of affirmation, of being affirmed in the space that you are in. One thing that we have to work on as institutions is affirming Black people, affirming, you know, people of color, but affirming Black people that they belong in that space by showing them that no matter where they come from in terms of a demographic or a socioeconomic background, but that they belong in that space by having other people who are like-minded in a way. And I'm speaking from a donor perspective, because what you find oftentimes is you look, Joy mentioned this, looking at a board and the homogeneousness of the board. It's the same thing with the donor base. And when you want to accumulate and invest in community, you are asking your board to do that. And you are asking your donor base to do that because you're soliciting them for money, right? You are fundraising amongst those people. So if I am fundraising amongst a white board and a 95% white donor base for Black programming.
See, that's real talk right there. That is absolutely real talk, because when we talk about this whole, I mean, it's the same thing happens in jazz as well, because you look at that board. A board is, one of their primary directives is to give money, is to financially support the organization. So if you have a primarily non-Black, you have a primarily white board, and you go to them and say, hey, this is what we want, that can very much be an issue sometimes. It's already hard to fundraise enough, just to keep whatever kind of organization you want above board, especially these days in COVID-19. So one thing that's deep is that I can already see that there's so many questions that are coming to my mind, and 1 hour is not going to be enough. 1 hour and 1 hour and a half is not going to be enough. I wish this could be a whole week-long discussion. I'm getting inspired, man. You guys are just like shooting off all kinds of stuff in my brain. But I do want to ask you the next question. This is a perfect lead up to the next question of, there have been many orchestras that have gone to many, even non-classical musical institutions who have been going to the blind audition model. But what sort of institutional values or hiring practices within orchestras and academia might need to change? I mean, is the blind audition enough? Should there be something else, something different, something more? Joy.
I'm so glad you said that. So I see Titus choosing over there too, because Titus and I have many long, near arguments, but it's like the type of argument where you're both saying the same thing and agreeing. It's just an animated conversation. It's a topic that's near and dear to us.
Bring it, bring it.
So these decisions that we need to make differently in order to have the industry look differently have a lot to do with the hiring and the firing process. So when we talk about auditions, there is this false idea that auditions are blind. And it's not only perpetuated by people outside of the industry that only know a little bit of passing knowledge about how orchestras actually work, but it's perpetuated by the musicians who were hired in non-blind auditions. So there's all sorts of different manners, all sorts of different ways that auditions take place. And ultimately, about 95% of them are not blind. So the most common way is that in most orchestras, the screen comes down in the final round. So the entire reason why the screen was up to begin with is null and void at that point. In a lot of orchestras, they have invite-only auditions. They have trial weeks. They have all sorts of situations in which you are hiring and making a decision about who is going to be a member of your orchestra that is not blind. Now, you could have an entirely different discussion about if the audition process as it currently stands is the best way to make a decision about who's going to join your orchestra. And I could argue a number of different ways about that. But if we are going to say that the audition process as it currently stands is the process that we should stick with, they actually should be blind in order to defend against the bias that is present in every single living, breathing human being. If you're alive, you have bias. And that's something that also is a little bit misunderstood. oftentimes people think that bias, just like that word privilege, it started to get a little buzzwordy and a little
Right.
provocative. It's not a provocative word. It's a simple matter of science. It's a fact that every single person has bias. I have bias. Everybody on this panel has bias. And the people sitting on audition panels have bias. So the audition is the way we hire musicians. Then the way oftentimes we wind up firing musicians is through the tenure process. And it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody on this panel, but it's probably a surprise to a lot of people in leadership positions that pretty much every single Black musician that I've spoken with and been in conversation with over the past several decades that I've been having these conversations, pretty much every single one has had some major issue in their tenure process, sometimes resulting in them not getting tenure. Now, the tenure process is there for a reason. It is an evaluative process, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But if you look at the percentage of Black musicians for whom it doesn't work out compared to the percentage of general musicians for whom it doesn't work out, it is significantly higher for musicians of color. So if you are, once again, one of those decision makers who is not aware of this disparity, you're not doing your homework. You're not able to make the decisions necessary to represent the industry and to advance it forward. So both of these processes are also run by musicians, and musicians are very talented people. We work long, hard hours to be able to control our tone, to be able to hold a note for a very long period of time, to be able to hit that shift consistently, but we are not trained in managerial operations. We don't have any further insight about this bias that I was talking about. We don't have any long-term goals that we are tapping into that might align with the organization and what they're trying to advance and push forward. So it's pretty strange to me that the hiring and firing decisions are made by people who are not trained actually to make those decisions. So I'll leave that for the moment. As you mentioned, we could talk about this for hours. I could talk about this for days, but I'll leave it there for the moment.
Joy, that's absolutely amazing. That you just, ooh, that was happening. Now, I want to hear. I'm sorry. I want to hear how you guys, because it's on you now, Titus. I want to hear your counter, because Joy said you guys get animated when y'all discuss this.
We do. We get heated, but Joy's my sister, so you know we just arguing for the sake of arguing. We don't know even why. But anyways, I think when I think of an audition process in America, I think of it like this. This is the audition process. Like, don't look, but your fingers are spread. That's the audition.
You're right.
In America, so like when I hear blind and audition, that's just not, it doesn't exist. It's like me saying, hey, how is it living on Mars? You'd be like, we don't live on Mars. But every time you talk about the planet, you bring up Mars. It's like, no, we don't live on Mars. That's how weird and foreign that conversation about a blind audition is to me. So like, there's only been about 2 or 3 institutions that's had the audition blind for years. And the thing is, it's like, and even if the audition system is blind, we are in a field where there is no post-tenure training. And I want to make something clear is that tenure for people who've been there, who haven't kept their chops up, doesn't mean quality. Tenure is tenure. That's all that is. It doesn't equal quality. You can't hide behind the name of your institution and not having practiced for 15 years. But then you want people to compete against your wildest imagination in an audition process. That doesn't make any sense. So there need to be measures in which musicians are held accountable, because we are they. We are the system. It isn't like this alien thing that descends upon us and like decides the audition result and the tenure process. I think that the tenure process should not have anonymous comments, because when people can just give comments whenever they want to, it's like, you know, when you go into the comments of a YouTube and you be like, why are they saying that? And it's like 52 this, and it's like some weird name, like, I don't know, but like Mac 3000. You don't know Mac.
Can't look at YouTube comments. It's depressing.
You can't. YouTube comments always win. So I'm saying, like, for me, I think if the process is above board, if there's some incentives where we're trained post tenure, like we're the only place when tenure happens, it stops. Like I can literally go cycling or skiing the rest of my life, show up kind of prepared, and I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, of course, we as musicians, we care about our craft. And I think that most musicians do really care about what they do, but I do think we need to put things in place where it incentivizes better behavior, where it incentivizes better accountability with comments, where we need to be trained how to hire and how to talk about things. How when you're going through an audition, that I'm not trying to be the bully on the committee that's undermining all the other listeners on the committee because I'm trying to get my way. So there's things that are not necessarily talked about, and as it pertains to Black players specifically, I think that there needs to be ways in which orchestras view corrective action. I really think that put it all on the table. People are like, what do you mean you're looking for Black players? We got to think about quality and all this stuff. I think every single option should be on the table when it comes to how do we get more representation of Black players. Because the reason why we're in this conversation right now is because of the death of George Floyd, right? And Breonna Taylor and all those people who lost. That's why we're talking about race right now. There's no other reason why it's such a hot topic. It's because it's Black Lives Matter. And I want people to remember that. So when we're having these racial conversations, it's really, really anchored on the people whose bodies have been damaged from that and why we're having this. And let's really repair that in a real meaningful way this time instead of just lip service.
Brother Titus, there it is. Tony Marie, please, I'd like to hear what you have to say in response to all of this.
Sure. Obviously, we in higher ed also have the tenure process, but if I go to the initial process of auditions, of course, they're not blind, but the fact is that individuals are invited to campus. If it's a performance position, then they perform, they do a public master class, and then the faculty write recommendations saying, yes, we think these are the strengths and the weaknesses of these individuals. I have, though, gone against search committees. And I think it goes back to this, an earlier question about having representation of individuals who are, I hate to use the word, but in power, in a position where you can say yes or you can say no. And so there have been, and our faculty will certainly say, yes, that's true. So for all of our searches, I do look at the candidates to see, if there is a BIPOC person who's not being included, or, it could be a white individual who I see is bringing in other skills that then will complement whatever the faculty that we have. But to be able to say, no, we're not going to hire this individual because of this and this, and you all need to go back and search. But again, that's a position that I feel honored to be in, but there aren't many people who will then go against the faculty and saying, no, you won't. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying that there have been situations where I just look now at those faculty members and say, thank goodness, we hired X because our program in whatever area is so much different. When I think about the tenure process, and for those who are listening, so it's really just music and then higher ed, all areas where a person after, usually in higher ed, it's 6 years, you're an assistant professor, and then you go up for tenure, which means that you have a job for life. And it's not anonymous, like what Joy and then Titus were addressing, but the fact that people are making a decision about someone's life. I think really we question, why should someone have a job for life, when Titus is talking about individuals who we see them in the back of the section of an orchestra and, they're barely playing, and yet they're continuing on. And then when you're talking about the expectations for new people, especially if we're talking about people of color, and then saying, well, they have to meet a certain standard when we do have dead wood, in the back. It reminds me of post-tenure review, because Titus, you were talking about, there should be some type of training after, well, maybe it's not even training, it could be remedial training for individuals after they reach that pinnacle. In higher ed in the 1990s, post-tenure review was a process where people had to go through, it was like a mini tenure where they had to show that they still were active and, you know, they were scholarly or they're still performing. And, but it just kind of died by the wayside. It was very difficult to even going through that process of then actually removing a faculty member because of tenure. So we do have similar systems that are in place. But again, I think it just really goes back to making sure that the individuals, whatever they look like, who are then in these positions of power, that they will question just the status quo, that they, because people will choose individuals who look like them, who with whom they feel comfortable. And that's not the way, you know, the world is. And think of when you were talking about various, it kind of reminds me of the book Caste, where, you know, there's not just one African-American person and then they're asked to give their opinion about such and such. We're so different, not only because of the melanin in our skin, but the way that we were raised and our thoughts. And so having a multitude of voices of various individuals is really important.
Wow, you guys are dropping some real gems, a lot of wisdom tonight. Afton, would you want to add something to all of this?
You know, in opera, we don't have tenure. You know, we are not like our friends in Europe where you get a fest contract and you just keep going and going like the Energizer Bunny. So we don't have that. There is an unstated, I believe, tenure model with artistic directors, general directors, things of that nature, where they just stay in these positions for years and years and years on end. And there needs to be something that needs to happen with that. That's something that needs to be addressed, because 10 plus, 20 plus years as an artistic director, general director, who is the person responsible for the hiring and the firing, the casting of all the things, you can't possibly be up to date and up to speed and just woke enough, I guess, you know, if I can use that very like buzzed out word, after you've been sitting in the same position for 25 years. I mean, and this, you know, goes from opera to theater. And I used to work in off-Broadway theater. Artistic director had been in that position for 25 years. Board members in that position for 30 years. And you think that doesn't affect your institution?
Right. Right.
You're crazy. In terms of auditioning, you know, opera singers, we got it bad. Like, and that, you know, it's just to do blind auditions is, I mean, you know, the voice better be on 1,000% on point. You better not have to depend on your acting technique or anything, which you should for sure be something taken into consideration. But, you know, so many singers do all of the things that they need to do. And this industry, the opera industry, just, there's nothing blind about the way that we cast. If it's not in you to look beyond what you see, then it's not in you. Curtain down or curtain up. If you can't look beyond what you see and what you think you hear in your mind, I'm casting for a butterfly, but I'm looking at this Black woman singing. Nah, that ain't gonna work. If it's not in you to look past it, then it's just not in you, and then you are the problem. That's what I'm gonna say.
Ooh, you guys are putting it down tonight. This has been such a wonderful, eye-opening experience conversing with all of you. We're going to get to our final question. It's we only have 15 minutes left, 14 minutes left. I do want to end this on a high note and ask all of you, given the scale of the issues we're facing in our field and in our society, what gives you hope for the future of Black artists?
Young people. I know you didn't ask me first, but young people give me hope. I mean, they give me hope like none other, because Titus said it and I wrote it down. The internet is the new stage. The way that these young people are taking this COVID and this situation of not being able to gather in halls and to perform in a traditional way and making a brand and a name for themselves in their lane has just blown my mind. It truly has. And, you know, not even just young people, but innovative, creative people like our girl Christian, you know, Karen has taken what she can do best, relationship building and talk to people, and has created her own lane and brand with that. And other people just taking it and, you know, trying to do their own thing, but she is like on it. And
Yes.
those people who look past the, oh, we can't go in the theater. What are we going to do? Let's just sit here and wait for COVID to be over. No. I said many months ago, yes, everyone has lost their job. We get it. But if you don't come out of this situation better than you went in as an artist, then you've missed the whole point of what's happening now. So it is those people who have just like taken over the moon and, you know, these industries that give me hope.
Yeah, right on. Just for the record, you say young people. All of us are still pretty young too. So you mean younger people.
Get a drink at the bar. I'm so young.
Dig it. Tony Marie.
So I would say younger people, yes, than I. When I look at our music students, so they could be 18 to 20 something. The fact that I see them coming into our building, coming to practice, their adaptability, their flexibility, their not complaining about using Zoom to have lessons, that they are then rehearsing, you know, having chamber music or having the pianist in another room and they are singing or playing in another room, but using technology and still that love of music and the need for being creative. That's what really gives me hope. And let me just say, for those who are older like myself, our faculty also give me hope, because I can remember last March when we were just in the middle of actually our winter quarter, and we had to then just say, okay, we have to close. The state is saying we have to leave and go home and shelter. And I remember in a faculty meeting that I had called, one faculty member said, "What's Zoom?" You know, I didn't know what Zoom was either, but she has, and all of our faculty have embraced it. No one's saying, no, I can't do this. And so again, it goes back to the importance of the arts and the fact, you know, I started crying when I saw we did a live Zoom of students who then were playing with mass, and these were all string students, string orchestra performing on one of our halls. And just the fact that the last time I saw or heard live music was in March. And just the absence of this and how it really affects our lives. So I think, as Afton said, we have to come out of this stronger because we see what's really important in life. At least I'm speaking for myself, and I think that you share that same feeling.
Yeah, thank you, Tony Marie. Brother Titus, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is, even though I know institutions are suffering, music's not dead. I mean, you pick up, that's the beauty of acoustic art. You pick it up, you play it, it's alive. You pick it up, you play it, you put it online. I mean, I've always said during this time that, yeah, the internet is the new stage. Like, me and some colleagues put together a Lift Every Voice project. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Hit over 1 million some views. I thought that was dope. Why? Because it was water that was in a well that was dry. People was waiting to see something like that. That means that there is a demand for that. So like, there's more to come. But the good thing is that I am optimistic in learning new skills and growing my craft during this time that would translate into the new normal. So I'm not looking at this as like, you know, I'm waiting to get back to the same thing again. I mean, nature is literally prohibiting us from going back to the same thing again right away. So instead of, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean that musicians aren't suffering, artists aren't suffering, that I don't miss it. I do miss playing with people and stuff like that. I love what I do. But at the same time, I have to look at both sides of the coin and not look at this from just some abysmal, like, this maybe it is a Black Mirror episode. I don't know. But but the thing I want to inspire people is to continue to play music, play the things that you want to play, create the art you want to create, put things out there, really think about it and be inspired by music. Like, we are dedicated to the art of practice. Keep doing that, keep working on your craft and see what things are out there, because you're not bound to anything right now. Do what you like to do and grow your craft.
That was beautiful, Titus. Joy, what gives you hope?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that Titus mentioned his Lift Every Voice project. It was really great. And while I'm talking, perhaps Titus, I don't know if you can work some magic with whoever's dropping links in the chat and get everybody that video link, because it was a really amazing project. There was also a video that was produced by some young students in the Juilliard program, some young Black students, and they played beautifully, and there was a collaboration with a dancer also at Juilliard. And this in the face of some pretty ugly comments that came out from a fellow student regarding diversity in the arts, which the situation has since been cleared up. But we have young musicians who are facing opposition and challenging times, but they still keep producing and they still keep excelling and still keep making these amazing projects that bring tears to my eyes. And so I guess the thing that brings me hope is that we are at a tipping point. And we're not just at a tipping point with young musicians, although we certainly are, but we're also at a tipping point with seasoned musicians, people who are starting to get into positions of influence, with seasoned arts administrators, people who are starting to get into positions of decision-making power. And we have the tools to be able to coordinate and communicate like never before. We have the resources, we have the information, and moves are being made to address the issues in a manner which seems to have eluded the industry up until now. So that's the main thing that's giving me hope, that there's a new type of leader starting to gain traction, and a type of leadership for whom it's not a heavy lift to reach out to community leaders and to build those relationships. It's not a heavy lift to try and excavate some of those issues faced by decades of musicians, and for whom bringing the fullness of this amazing art form to audiences is paramount. So in that way, I think that we're entering a new phase of music, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah. Thank you all for your wonderful insights on that. One of the things that gives me hope is that, like Titus said, if you can play it, it's alive. I think one of the things that I experienced from that night watching Yo-Yo Ma perform with the Philadelphia Orchestra, or watching Freddie Hubbard perform with his band, watching Gladys Knight or James Brown, something about that music that came out of them transcended obstacles. Somehow nothing seemed like an obstacle, because something about that medicine that came from their bodies, that music they created, it just opened the world right on up. So it gives me hope to know that all of us, when we play a note, as hard as times are right now, it always sometimes feels like people aren't really listening, aren't really paying attention. But you can rest assured somebody is paying close attention to every note we play, everything that we do, and we are curating a new leader, whether we know it or not. So that's what gives me hope. And I would like to thank Afton. You're wonderful. It was wonderful to speak with you. Tony Marie, thank you. Joy Payton Stevens, Titus Underwood, all of you are just geniuses. It was wonderful to speak with you. I'd like to thank all of the viewers, Michael Martin and the teams at Oberlin Conservatory and the New World Symphony. That's right. And the sponsoring organizations that made tonight possible. And the recording will be available on the Oberlin Conservatory Facebook page. And soon, I'm not going to read all that. You can see it in the chat down at the bottom. But it's been a joy to speak with all of you. And my name is Christian McBride. It's been a pleasure to be your moderator this evening, and we will see you soon. Stay positive.